This video will show you how path diagrams for a program, in other words, a logic model, can help you figure out what does and does not work and what can go wrong. The anti-crime program called Broken Windows is getting a lot of attention in the news. It's being blamed for bad and unfair outcomes for young minority men. How is Broken Windows actually supposed to work? Was it a reasonable plan? How has it gone wrong? Are the bad side effects related to how it was supposed to work? We can use path models, logic models, to help us think carefully to try to work this out. From my perspective, some components of the so-called Broken Windows program were a little vague. Not everyone agreed on what the program was. And more importantly, as we'll see, people were also vague about the mechanisms. So what's an example of one component of the Broken Windows approach? Let's first talk about how it was supposed to work. When talking about a program or this program, don't just mention vaguely a theory like, if it looks broken down, it signals that no one cares. That was something people said about the Broken Windows idea, because a program needs to be something that is actually implemented, some specific actions. So what was a component of the Broken Windows theory, or the Broken Windows program?
Reduce crime?
Well, that was a goal. That was definitely the goal, the outcome. But in your logic model, you don't want to confuse a goal, the outcome, right? Because the goal was reducing crime. It was supposed to go down. You don't want to confuse that with the mechanism or the program itself. They're all distinct. The outcome is crime, the goal is to reduce crime, but we want to know, what is Broken Windows? It's a program. People actually have to have implemented something, done something. One thing people used to say was a component was erasing graffiti. Others were cracking down on turnstile jumping. What were the general components of the actual Broken Windows program?
So the people who advocated said that through some process, some mechanism or mechanism somehow, if you could have this Broken Windows program, crime would go down, right? So this was the program. This is the outcome.
So my vague hand waving in the prior clip was about how advocates said good things would somehow percolate from Broken Windows to crime. But we really have two distinct questions about the stuff in the middle. First, what does the program actually consist of? Erasing graffiti for sure. What else does the program consist of? Making clear what the program implements, that belongs in the program description of a logic model. The second question after that is how those concrete actions, the program you implement, are supposed to eventually lower crime. Why will kids in the neighborhood change their behavior? That's the mechanism. So first, we're going to start with the program. So what's one program component of the Broken Windows policy, something it actually implemented? Leanne?
Crack down on misdemeanor crime, little crimes?
Oh, good. I think that was definitely one of the things they meant. So crackdown is a little vague. Let's say arrest for minor crimes. Okay, so we have arrest for minor crimes as one of the components of the Broken Windows program. There are others, but let's work with this one. So why do you believe that arresting people for minor crimes is going to end up with an overall reduction in crime? Natalia?
Because people will not repeat the crime.
Good, but why? That's always my process with logic models. Keep asking why, like kindergartner. And I'm not disagreeing with you, but I want you to spell out spell it out. Why will arresting people for smaller crimes stop them from reoffending?
Because there will be fewer people to perform a crime.
Ah, okay. Fewer people on the streets because they're locked up. So the number of people in jail will rise, and that means fewer criminals on the street. Fewer criminals on the street, and that is what is causing the reduction in crime. So fewer people on the streets, less crime. So now we've got our mechanism here. Let's think about how plausible it is. If those are really small minor crimes, is it true that the people committing them will be locked up and locked up for a while, keeping them off the streets and stopping them for committing more crime? And in particular, will it stop them from committing major crimes, serious crimes? Let's focus on serious crime as an issue. Violent crime, serious property crime, since that's what people care most about. Is it true that being arrested for a minor crime is going to keep you off the streets for a long time to stop you from ultimately preventing a serious crime? Is that really the mechanism? Maybe that's not so persuasive. So why would being arrested for a minor crime ultimately prevent serious crime? Natalia?
Maybe fear of arrest for something small will lead to think that that crime isn't worth doing.
Okay, so somehow this is going to affect the idea that on net crime isn't worth it because they've had experience being arrested even for a minor crime. So let's try and make that idea more specific, focusing on expecting arrest for minor crime and a bad experience of being arrested. Okay, so maybe there are more important effects from being arrested for minor crimes than taking criminals off the streets. Let's focus first on expecting arrest for minor crimes. Some budding criminal may think, oh no, I did a little bit of vandalism, that's all, and I got arrested. Expectations of being arrested for a minor crime could go up from that, and that in turn would certainly increase expectations for being arrested if they committed a serious crime. And that in turn could decrease someone's image of the net incentive for committing crime. I commit crime, I'll get some property, I'll get some benefit, but boy, I'm expecting to be arrested. And the lower the incentive for committing crime, the less someone will commit the crime. The idea here is that there's sort of a cost-benefit analysis going on, and by raising someone's notion of the likely cost of committing crime, it will lower that net benefit, lower the incentive, and thus lower the crime. What about the other thing we're talking about, having experience of how lousy it is to be arrested, spend time in jail, and so on? That improves knowledge about what a miserable experience it is, and again causes the young person to avoid it, and again reduces that net incentive. Like, oh, that'll be unpleasant. I don't want to do that, even though it would be great to steal stuff or commit vandalism or whatever. Now, everything we have here, this whole thing, that's a lot of detail. For many purposes, you don't want this amount of detail in your logic model. What I'm trying to show here is the process of really thinking hard about a program and how it will work. It's good to push yourself not to be vague. And now that we've been this explicit, we can look at it and ask, how plausible is this? Are teens and young men going to make rational cost-benefit calculations? maybe awareness of this net incentive won't have such a big effect if it's other kinds of forces that are driving crimes big and small. Plus, we only really looked at one component. We talked about arrest for minor crimes. Broken Windows has lots of other components. To fully understand the program, you should look at all the components and think about all the plausible mechanisms for them. That'll take a while, but it really can highlight what's potentially weak, not convincing, and how to improve things. But now let's move on to the bad side effects and why Broken Windows is having such a bad reputation right now. To do that, we don't want to focus on this whole big mechanism for now. For now, we're just going to go back to the idea that Broken Windows decreased crime and focus on the bad reputation. It's associated with the Black Lives Matter movement. The idea is that there's racial discrimination and unequal treatment, especially for African American young men, because of bad outcomes of the program. And as a result, they're getting bad life outcomes. So first of all, we have to say, what are the exact outcomes that people are talking about? So here is the original idea of Broken Windows, the idea that it would reduce crime. But here are the reasons that it got criticized and that it's being so criticized now. The idea is that it resulted in bad criminal justice outcomes for minorities that were unjustified, where non-minority young men who did the same things wouldn't experience such bad outcomes. And as a result, that to really bad life outcomes, trouble getting a job, economic problems, disruptive families, for disruption to the families. So now the question is, what is there about the Broken Windows program that might have led to the bad outcomes that are getting such publicity? So what's your theory about why broken outcomes, and maybe especially the focus on arrest for minor crimes, but really any, were leading to the bad outcomes?
Abusive power.
Okay, abuse of power. I think that's definitely a widely held view. But what do we really mean by that? Try and explain how and why arrests for minor crimes gets you to abuse of power.
Well, this policy might lead police to arrest more people.
Okay, so there would be an incentive for them to make more arrests. That's going to be the direction they get. Let's look at how that might work. Okay, so here's how that might work. There's the policy of arresting for minor crimes, and the police get incentives. They're directed to do these arrests. What does that mean? That means then that they're going around searching for potential arrests, and they're going to start to arrest anyone they think they can get a conviction for. So if they're searching around for whoever they can convict, supposing there's general prejudice, maybe even not on the part of the police officer, but out there with judges and juries, even if a police officer didn't wish or try to discriminate, they might end up discriminating if that's going to help them get conviction. So the general level of prejudice out there is a moderator. Basically, the Broken Windows causes police to go out and increase their arrests of whoever is easy to convict. And if there's a general level of prejudice really with anybody out there, the police officers, juries, judges, whoever, that's going to make minorities easier to convict and result in bad criminal justice outcomes for them, even and then relative to non-minorities who may have done the same thing, but might be harder to get a conviction for. This theory also explains the fact that's seen whereby black police officers are often thought to be guilty, or at least sometimes thought to be guilty, of the same sort of uneven behavior. So I'm not an expert in this at all. It's not my field, and this theory might not be right. But I hope that it gives you a sense of how you can use path models to really think logically and clearly about a mechanism. And that can help you explore what is and is not going on, uncover side effects, uncover new places to look for evidence, and so on. So here's the whole thing together. We've put back in some of our mechanisms for why this particular component of broken windows, namely arresting for minor crimes, might actually help reduce crime. And we've also put in our theory for how it might have some of the bad effects that have become so controversial of late. So I hope that you will now see this as a really useful tool for thinking about programs and thinking through how they might or might not work.